Okay, thank you all for your patience. I'll call this meeting to order and ask that we all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Sullivan Taylor has our land acknowledgement.
Thank you. Okay. Evergreen Public Schools resides on the traditional lands of the Chinookan peoples and the Cowlitz tribe. They have lived on and cared for this land and its waterways since time immemorial. We thank them for their stewardship and make this acknowledgement to open a space of recognition, inclusion, and respect for all Indigenous families, students, and staff in our community.
Thank you, Sullivan. Okay, before you use the agenda for tonight's meeting.
I move to accept the agenda for tonight's meeting as presented.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. The agenda has one business item on it entitled Superintendent Succession Plan.
I'd like to move a motion to appoint board president and vice president to define a process to hire a new superintendent.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded to, we wrote it down here, Lori, if you need, to appoint the board president and vice president to define a process to select a new superintendent. Is there any discussion? And I think I'll just lead off by saying this is probably a good time to also discuss what kind of process, in broad strokes, it is that we're thinking about together.
I guess I'll kick it off. So defining the process, does that include any temporary solutions that we might be looking for? Is looking for somebody in the interim until we can go through a full process to find a superintendent?
Mm-hmm.
That would be my guess, since John's leaving at the end of June.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty short time frame to find a permanent superintendent, and I'm mindful of a lot of community members who've called for an open and public process for the permanent appointment. And so I think it'd be appropriate to reach out to the search consultants who, two of them have already indicated availability, and I know there are some others, and see who could help us to find someone to become the interim superintendent as we go through the more formal national or regional search process.
Does that include using those same firms to help us find an interim and a permanent superintendent at the end, or are you going to look for somebody as we're looking, because we're going to have to go out and get an RFP for search firms.
Right.
And so in order to do that, are we going to then be on the coinciding with the search for an interim? Because I feel like the two processes might have to go side by side.
Yeah.
Or do we need to do more research for that?
I think that ideally we find an interim superintendent and then we take our time to do the search. So we start the process, we find someone to help us get an interim superintendent. I personally would like that person to not be someone who's going to apply for the full-time job. But we have to have a conversation about that.
Yeah.
And then I think that it wouldn't be parallel. We'd have the chance to, while we have the interim, do our search, our public process.
One thing that we do have in our favor is that John is here with us because he's not retiring until the end of June. So we're lucky that we have him to help us through this transition. I think his expertise and will help us and help transition somebody who might come in an interim so they can get all of the information from John to maybe help lead us into the start of next school year, because to do a full process, like I think that I would want to do, and I'm not sure how the others feel about it, is going to take some time.
Yeah.
So we're probably going to need somebody in place to help us into the next school year and transition with John through the beginning of summer, obviously at the end of the school year and beginning of summer. So my ideal would have somebody in place before John goes, so we know who our interim's going to be.
I agree.
That sounds, is this on?
And as I told Directors Perkins and Weatherspoon, I am retiring June 28th will be my last day. Annie and I are sticking in the area, so I'll be happy to volunteer as much time as it takes to help support transition, meet and confer with the interim superintendent to the extent they need it.
I really appreciate that, John.
Thank you, John. And we're looking at a couple of firms, it sounds like, possibly doing.
Well, two firms have already indicated an interest in serving as superintendent search partners with us, but what I'm interested in, I think, is the process where we request for proposals. That'll give folks, that'll give us a public announcement, and then folks who do that business will be able to choose from more than just the ones who volunteered so far. And it's a good way to be transparent about it by having the RFP and then reviewing those. We can be open about the process.
I believe we actually have to look at 3 of them at least.
At least 3, yeah.
Yeah, community involvement is crucial at this time, and similar to the budget survey we had, I'd love to see a superintendent survey where we ask 4 or 5 questions and get feedback from stakeholders. We had, 400 staff, almost 300 community members, and over 200 students respond to our budget survey. So I think something similar to that for superintendent would really be helpful, would let us know the pulse of the district, and we could even talk about a few questions tonight if we'd like.
Well, Gary, I think that I think it's a great idea, and I agree. But I do think that once we place a search firm, that they will help guide us through that process. I mean, they'll work with the board in helping us identify the questions, probably even through focus groups too, to help identify some of those questions that would go out
Right.
in surveys.
Yeah, I didn't know if we wanted to hop on that before or what the timeline.
I would say that we should probably put our efforts into finding the search firm. But one thing I would suggest, because Rob's right, we've already had people approach us, because that's what happens in situations like these. But I would caution that we not just go with ones that are reaching out to us, that we also ask our partners at WASA and WASDA and the ESD, and maybe get some suggestions from search firms from them.
And I guess just for the full disclosure is that, wasn't it the day of or the day after? It was the day after the executive team learned of this, that we had a conversation with legal counsel who recommended pretty much exactly the same thing, and gave us the names of the best contacts at both WASA and WASDA to get some advice. So I think we should take time with them, write down their advice, and then we'll be better informed.
And then all this information that we get, we'll discuss in open public meetings.
We'll have to.
Yes.
Yeah, it's an open matter, except for those times when we review the qualifications of a superintendent candidate. I think that's the only carve-out where we need to meet in closed session. Does that sound right to you?
It does sound right.
Okay.
And the search firm will know precisely when you can be in executive session, should be in executive session, and when you should be in the open public forum.
And the fee for a search firm, is that only paid out to the firm that we end up going with their selection? Okay, thank you.
Yeah, once we accept the contract, then we pay out.
Mm-hmm. Any other comments?
So the resolution at this point is just to appoint the 2 of you as the 2 that will kind of lead the process in moving us forward with the finding a search firm,
Mm-hmm.
and the interim superintendent part. I just want to be clear that that's
Correct.
the 2 areas of focus.
Yes.
I know the community in the past has shared concern about the contract for the superintendent when it includes a buyout. So I don't know if that will become part of discussion before anything is offered.
I think every clause in the contract will be part of the discussion.
Okay.
However, I haven't seen a superintendent contract in the state for all the years that I've been on the board. Maybe you can corroborate that. That doesn't come with some kind of payout of at least 1 year. Years ago, Evergreen had superintendent contracts that had a 3-year payout. And after a certain point in time, so I think it was the departure of Superintendent Corley, that the new contracts that the board wrote were for a 1-year payout.
I also think there was language, though, in the first year of about 6 months, if there was something in the first year. But you're absolutely right, Rob. There is not a superintendent contract out there that doesn't have that 12-month clause.
So I think we can expect that a superintendent candidate would ask for that in their contract for the reasons that they give us.
Even an internal hire? Or you think?
An interim hire. An interim hire, I don't have as much experience about, but
Typically, those are for the duration of the time that you employ them. So if you employ an interim for a year, it would be a 1-year contract. There would
Right.
not be a provision for them to be entitled to any kind of compensation when you end their employment.
right.
I think the key will be the timing, though, of, because we might not need to employ an interim for a year. It depends really on when we placed a superintendent.
Mm-hmm.
So that might be a point of discussion as well, as we look for interim candidates.
Right.
So we're not going to know the timeline for when any of this happens until we get a search firm.
Right.
So,
Actually, I didn't say interim hire. I said internal hire.
Yeah, okay, an internal hire, we could have a discussion about that, but it'd be my anticipation that a person hired from inside the district to take the superintendent's job would negotiate a contract similar to the other superintendents in the state. It'd just be an expectation that matches all of my experience with the contracts that we've written and that I've seen. Certainly can be a subject for discussion, but I'm not sure we can get a good one without those kinds of protections. Any other comments or questions? Very good. Hearing none, we'll take a vote. All those in favor of this motion?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? The motion carries. And now it's time to get to work. Thank you for coming to the meeting. It is 6:16 p.m., and we'll go ahead and adjourn at this time. Thank you.